Welcome to Adobe Document Services, also known as doing super exciting, wonderful stuff with documents. I cannot promise to keep up this level of excitement for the entire slide deck, but one of the nice things is that this is a very practical, very useful set of services that I will try to make enjoyable, at least in some small way. My name is Raymond Camden. I am a developer evangelist for Adobe. Joined about 8 or so months ago. This is my second time at Adobe. Back when I was there last time, we were all about HTML5. Remember that? All right, I'm waiting for Web 4. I'm just going to skip Web 3 and go right to Web 4. Be an early adopter for whatever that is. I have a blog at Raymond Camden. If you have any questions about what I'm showing today, I also tweet at Raymond Camden and my DMs are open. If you have any questions at all, please reach out. I love to talk about tech and cats. So if you have questions about any of those things, you are welcome to reach out at any time at all, and I will do my best to get back to you with a somewhat sensible answer, hopefully. So what I'm talking about today is going to kind of fall into two main buckets. The first bucket will be just viewing PDFs on the web, rendering them, showing them on a web page, etc. This is our free stuff. So if you use that, I get nothing. And also then working with and manipulating PDFs, doing changes, etc. This is the non-free tier, but when you sign up, I get to feed my children. So no pressure at all. But there is a really good free trial. I'll talk a bit more about how that works in a bit. So I'm going to talk about the first thing, the viewing experience. And again, this is the free thing. Doesn't cost you a dime to sign up. Adobe Pdf Embed. This is a JavaScript solution for viewing PDFs on the web. And one of the reasons why you would use this is that it provides a lot more control over the experience. Web browsers do a really good job nowadays of rendering a PDF. If you link to a PDF, you don't have to download it and go to a different application. The browser just renders it, and it does a mostly good job of rendering that content. And actually, I'm going to show you an example of where it doesn't do a good job. But what PDF Embed does is actually give you a lot more control over that experience. So you don't have to worry about Microsoft Edge, for example, versus how Mac Safari renders a PDF. You will get a consistent viewing experience and one that you actually can have a bit of control over. We'll talk about different ways of viewing PDF content. Different PDFs call for different ways of viewing stuff. So technical content, long form, 20, 30 pages, that would be different than a marketing brochure of 2 or 3 high quality image pictures. So we give you different ways to actually show that PDF that would make sense for whatever your content is. We also give you a lot of hooks into the document. So the classic example is that your legal team comes to you and says, we need you to make people read a document that they're not going to read. So what you do as a developer is you write code that forces someone to scroll down, even though we know for a fact no one is reading it, but the legal team requires it. Well, one of the things that you could do is do that same BS requirement with a PDF, because we give you hooks to know as you view pages, as you scroll and stuff like that. Anybody here a lawyer? No? Oh, okay, good. I love our legal team, really, I do. And again, this is all free outside of us making you sign up and getting your email address. So this is an example, and by the way, I'm using a HTML-based, web-based presentation framework. So what you are seeing is an example of the Embed API. And the first thing that hopefully kind of stands out is that typically when the browser does a PDF render, it takes over the entire web page. So now a user can just go back. That's not that big of a deal. But if you wanted to keep your site UI, your navigation and stuff like that, or if you just wanted other stuff on the page with the PDF, comments or a form that integrates with the PDF, etc., you lose all that typically when you let the browser kind of take over and render it. You see here I still have my presentation controls. I have my header on top. I have my background, which is just gray. But then I have the PDF embed viewed in here. And I realize that may be a little bit small, but I can scroll, I can do all the things you could imagine. I also have annotation controls. So I want more of this. This is great. And honestly, I'd rather have less text and just more pictures of cats. So I can go here and I'm going to add a comment. More cat pics, please. Oh, cat pics. Please, I have enough cat pee in my house. 3 cats, so that's a problem. So it's a full PDF viewing experience. I could also go in here and save this. I'll go ahead and download the PDF. I'll open it, and what's great is that I actually have Acrobat installed. I told the browser to download it. I want to open it now, and the browser says, you know, I think I know better. Even though you downloaded, I'm going to open it for you. I mentioned the browsers do a decent job of rendering a PDF. So this is a PDF that I edited. I was able to annotate it just fine and download it. I could send that to somebody else, but Edge does not support comments. Acrobat, obviously, if I use the real Adobe application to open it up, if I used our embed viewer, I'd get full support. Edge is only like about 95% there in terms of rendering a PDF. And that's not to beat up on Edge. I love Microsoft Edge. That's why I'm using it right now. But it's a great example of why you'd want a bit more control over the PDF experience. I could do a print from here. I could do a search. Essentially, this is Acrobat in the browser with all the rest of my site Chrome still in there. So in terms of how you actually use this, first thing you need to do is get a key. So you will go to our website, you will sign up. If you don't have an Adobe ID, we make you get one so we can spam the living hell out of you every single day. All right, maybe not every day, maybe once a month or so, but you will need an Adobe ID. If you are a Creative Cloud person, then you already have that. Once you have that, you get your key, and I'm just going to scroll past this. Keys are host specific, so like a lot of JavaScript frameworks or services out there, it is tied to where you are going to deploy your code. That way someone can't take your key and run it on your domain. One thing I will point out, our key management system only allows 1 host per key. So you can't go in there and add localhost, for example. So when I first signed up, I just did RaymondCamden.com. My plan was to test on localhost. I wasn't planning on going there at all. And I just kind of assumed that I could add localhost or add a different domain later. We kind of require you to make a whole separate project for each different domain. So what I suggest, if you're testing and playing with it, just do localhost. If you dig it and you like it, make a new project. Do your domain. Don't do www. Just do RaymondCamden.com. That way, later on, you could do www.RaymondCamden.com, staging.Raymond, QA, etc. If you do just the high-level domain, all the subdomains will work on that. So once you get your key, you will then load the library, which is us giving you a URL that you will copy and paste into your code. Next, you will wait for the library to load. And this is done via an event that just rolls off the tongue. You ready? Adobe_DC_view_SDK.ready ready. This will fire when the library is ready to go. This is the main option. This is what you will see in our documentation. This works unless the event has already fired. So when I first started playing with this, I was playing in Vue.js, and because of just the way things were loading and unicorns and stuff like that, when I actually had this code run, it did not fire because it had already loaded and fired before that. You can check for a window variable, Adobe DC, and if that exists, that means the library is already loaded. So I typically recommend code like this. If I've already loaded, do some startup crap. Otherwise, listen for that event, and when that event is fired, then run your startup code. And y'all stop me if I go too fast or if you have any questions. All right, so we have loaded the library. We've written some code to say, hey, are you ready to go yet? next we need to initialize and load the PDF. This is where the magic will happen. You will create an instance of an Adobe DC object and run the view method. This takes 2 arguments by default. The first being your client ID. This is the thing that we give you when you sign up. And the second will be the div ID. So on your web page, you will figure out where you want that PDF. You will assign a div and put an ID on there. You will remember that ID. And then when you get to the code, you will specify it right there. After you've created that initial object, you then run preview file where you give it the location, in this case the URL, and you have to give it a file name as well. I think that part is a little weird. I'm kind of advocating for not needing that, but for right now you do. You do not have to point to a URL. You can use a file promise as well. If you don't understand what file promise means, if you want to let users select a PDF on their system and render it on your web page, because maybe you're going to allow them to upload a resume and you want them to look at it first or potentially even add comments to it. If you use a file promise, that's how you would let a user select a file, use JavaScript to read it, and pass it to our API to then render on page. If that doesn't make sense, I can show you a demo later on of how that actually looks. So as an example, and this is pretty much almost the exact same as that example I showed on the presentation slide. I have HTML, I have my PDF, and I have some text beneath it. I could absolutely make this smaller. This is a bit ginormous for this web page. 1 second, I apologize. My battery died, so my apps all went bye-bye. Well, that should be it right there. And this code is pretty much exactly what I showed on screen. I'll make it bigger for y'all. Is that big enough? Cool. Yep, there's my code. If you copy it right now, you could run on localhost. I won't tell anybody. This is the, have I loaded or wait to load. And then this is the code below where I initialize and point to the URL. I did use all of my design skills, and I added some CSS to my div to size it. Again, that size is just me being creative. You can obviously make it look a little bit nicer. And I used the background on the web page just to make the PDF stand out a bit more. Any questions on that? Yes?
It's a dumb question, but if you have content in the div that you designate as your PDF div, does it get replaced or does it flow around PDF? Or what happens if there's content in it?
So his question was, what happens if there's content inside that div and then I load a PDF? It goes to the nether regions of hell. So we can actually do this. It should be super fast. So bye-bye, it was nice knowing you. Save it, reload, over here. You see a flash. So you could actually put a PDF loading ... type message there as a simple way of, yeah. That was a great question, thank you. So I mentioned that there were different ways to change the view, kind of the initial experience. We have what are called embed modes. The initial one is called a sized container. And I'll warn you, these names are not great. Again, as part of my job, I'm advocating giving slightly nicer names, but sized container means 1 page at a time versus an endless scroll of documentation. Full window actually means full div. It does not mean the full browser window. This is the default where you just kind of scroll and do PDF. So to me, like a book is good in that format. I want to just read slowly, line by line. More of a marketing PDF of pictures, I think, is better 1 page at a time. But again, though, like we let you pick what you want to do there. There's also an inline where we take the PDF and we just stretch that guy out. So the important thing there is that if you specify a height for that div, we're going to blow that away to stretch out your PDF. Don't do that for a 100-page PDF, or you will get a very, very long web document. And then we have Lightbox, which is essentially a modal window. All this ends up being is a new argument to the preview file method we had before. It's an embed mode. We have constants for each of those modes. And I will show you a demo of this. So again, this is the default full window. Again, bad name, it's really full div. That size container is one page at a time. And by the way, again, this right now in this mode, this is not sized nicely. I would absolutely make this thinner to fit my actual content a bit nicer. Inline, again, we'll stretch it out. So I will have the entire PDF all the way down here. And for Lightbox, this will actually not render the PDF immediately. This will let you run a UI item to open it up. I have a better demo of this here. And typically, it would be something like this. Hey, I have a cool PDF I want to show you. You click a button, and now we do a modal window. And if I hit escape, it goes away. All right, so we allow you to modify the UI. We allow you to disable print and save. If your spotty sense is tingling, Ray, you point to a URL, I can still save that. Yes, you're right. This is going to save casual people saving it. Even if you didn't use a URL and used a file promise or streamed data from some sort, I could still take my phone out and take a picture of the screen. So again, this is meant to stop most people, not all people. You could turn off the ability to do annotations and comments, and we have a lot more tweaks you can go in there, but basically it ends up being just more options that you pass to our APIs. So in this case, I'm turning off download, turning off print, turning off annotations and left-hand panel. And to show you just how that looks, it looks the exact same, except the UI has kind of gone away a bit. I could show you the code. If you download my repo, my slide deck and all that, it's all in there, but literally it's the exact same code on the slide deck. You have access to information about the PDF. So if you need to know, for example, how many pages it is, we could tell you that. You have the ability to go to a page, to do zooms, to do searches. You have annotations. You have an API to add your own annotations. You have easy access to Adobe Analytics, but we give you full event support. So if you want to use Google Analytics, you have to do your own work. You have to listen for events and say, on page view, run this GA event of some sort. But we support you doing that. So real use case examples of this. I built a search engine for PDFs for my 11e static website. And when you find something like the word cat in a PDF, I made it so that when you load it, I take the PDF embed, I load that particular cat PDF, I use the search API, and it fakes like the user searched for something. So it scrolls down, it highlights it, it makes it stand out. And again, the embed API gives me those hooks to do that. If for some reason I knew that you were on page 3 the last time you viewed the site, I could use local storage, remember that, and when you come back to my web page, look in local storage, load the PDF, use the API to send you back to page 3. So we gave you all those kinds of APIs and events and stuff to do that. If you like this and you want to show your boss, we have a non-cat demo, because Adobe is just not as fun as I would like, that has very serious financial legacy PDFs. But a non-developer could take a look at this and play around. Even as a developer, I love the fact that I can click generate code and see how they did this. You can also upload your own PDF to look at it. You can see options like, hey, how do I turn off download? And stuff like that. Again, very nice little playground. Great if you need to convince management to, or marketing to start using this in your website. Excuse me. Any questions on that before I go on? Again, that's totally free. Works in every browser except IE 11, which was just officially deprecated by Microsoft.
Yes, it is possible to extract, for example, the annotations that I did. I see there is annotation API, but I was thinking maybe I have the PDF embedded in my page, then the user makes certain annotations, and just I can grab it from there and store in my database or something like that. That is possible.
So his question was, and tell me if I get this wrong, can I take the annotations the user added to the PDF and do something, anything with it? Absolutely, yes. So we have an API to get and set those annotations. It's a very big JSON schema, very complex, so it's all the positional. Like if you draw, the JSON data represents the XY of all of that. If you add a comment, it's the XY where it started and the text of the comment. So you can build a multi-user live commenting system. We don't have that for you. Like we don't run a server where we manage your authentication and Bob and Gary doing different comments. But we have the tools to allow that, where if you have that server and Gary last week wrote 5 comments, if you store that, when you load the PDF, if you give us that data and run it through our API, we'll render it on that PDF for you. So if you handle the persistence, is what I'm saying, then you could definitely save and restore annotations. So I think a great use case of that would be for teachers. So a teacher has a PDF they want to share with their students. They have their own annotations, their own comments. So they could use the Embed API, they could write their comments, they could use code then to save those comments, and when they share PDFs with their students, they see the comments from their teacher.
Yes, because I was thinking, for example, currently there is a service named Readwise, and there you can load the PDF and they extract all the annotations and they store it in their service.
Yeah.
For example, I was thinking maybe you are just making annotations in there, and at the same moment you can see, well, the same application can extract it and you can do whatever you want with that.
So are you talking about like real-time multi-user annotation? So my coworker has an example of that. Now it's a mocked up example, no authentication, and like this multiple browser tabs. So you still need to do the work to handle user authentication, user authorization, stuff like that. But the Embed API is ready to say, hey, you called in and said Bob added a new comment, I'll show it to Gary. We have that support baked in if you handle the server-side component of that. Does that distinction make sense of what we handle versus what you have to worry about?
And then in that case, then this API can react. I mean, if I make certain annotation that can notify to the parent code that something was annotated, or just I need to go and dig in that data?
So if you have multiple users, you would need some way to communicate to the other users. So that would...
I was thinking more in like I am thinking something simple. You have your PDF, and next to there you have a simple div, and when you are making your rotations or selecting something in there, I want in that div, you have all that content available in there. So I was thinking maybe the API can trigger certain events that I can grab directly with JavaScript and just put it in there.
If you're asking about just getting it out, yes, you can. So if you have a PDF with existing annotations, you definitely have programmatic access to that. So if you wanted to not render it in PDF embed, but render it in HTML on the side, you could do that.
I would like to see, for example, if the PDF can say, hey, JavaScript, I have some new annotations. Hey, JavaScript, I have new annotations. Hey, JavaScript, I have new annotations.
I will cautiously say yes, that should definitely be possible. Definitely hit me up later, and we could talk more about that. All right, so now that I've lured you in with this cool free tool, now I'm here to hit you up with some money. I'll talk about more about the server-side aspects of this. So we have 3 core APIs. This is all available via REST API, but we do have SDKs for Java, Node, Net, and Python. I put an asterisk by Python because Python doesn't support everything we do yet. I'll be a bit more clear about what it does support in a minute. We do have REST APIs. So if you're using something not supported, or you want to do Python and not do what the SDK supports, you can use the REST-based API. This is not free, but you get 1,000 calls, and I guarantee you, if you come to us and say, I like the service, I did my testing, I need more time to test, we will absolutely give you more time. Just reach out. And it's 6 months, which I love because I cannot tell you how many services I've signed up for that sound really cool, and then life happens, like, I don't know, COVID, and then a year later, you're like, oh, now I got time to play with it, and your trial ended. So I appreciate that we give a nice, very long duration for you to kind of play around and test this stuff out before that ends. You will need credentials. It's a bit more complex than the PDF Embed API. This is all on the server. It's like 200 keys. I'm being a bit dramatic. It's not 200, but it's a bit more complex than the front-end stuff. In terms of the features, we have the PDF Services API, Document Generation API, and PDF Extract API. Now, these are essentially marketing terms. Everything falls under PDF Services. If you get our Node SDK, you have everything. You don't have to worry about getting 3 different SDKs. I will say the DocGen API and the Extract API are very powerful. They're very kind of big ticket items. So typically I'm kind of anti-marketing, but I like the marketing for that because they do deserve to be called out as like special parts of the greater whole. But just keep in mind that once you get our SDK, once you get 1 credentials, you can play with all of these particular features. PDF services, this used to be known as PDF tools. So if you're ever Googling and see a blog article talking about the PDF tools API, it's the same thing. This is everything related to manipulating a PDF. This is the part that I warned you about that was boring, but hopefully useful. So, and I know it's kind of small, if you want to create PDF from Office documents or HTML, if you want to go from PDF out to Office documents or text or images, if you want to combine PDFs, if you want to OCR PDF, that's a really nice feature. If you've ever gotten a PDF that was one large scanned image and you tried to find something on it, then you have a bad PDF. We can try to fix that for you. If you want to compress or make a PDF smaller in general, if you want to add a password or just change permissions, like for example, no print, or take those locks away. If you need to move stuff around, a real-world example of this, legal has said every PDF our department puts out has to have a legal disclaimer on page 1. You can automate that process. If you want to break apart a PDF, so you sell PDFs, you sell these documents, you want to offer a like 3 or 4 page preview. You can automate the process of creating a preview version of a PDF that you can put online via PDF for people to see, PDF Embed, to see if the user wants to buy it. If you want to get PDF properties like the page number and stuff like that, fonts used, we have APIs for that. All of those services, all those features pretty much work the exact same way in your SDK. You'll make a credentials object. You'll create a execution context specific to your operation. You'll tell it the input. So like for Microsoft Word to PDF, you'll tell it, hey, it's foo.docx, and I want to output to cat.pdf. You will execute and then save your result. I don't expect you to read this and memorize this, but this is the general flow of pretty much every single aspect of our PDF, of our services. So I tell it where my credentials are. By default, it's 2 files. It's a JSON file with a couple keys, and then it's a private.key file. If that makes your spidey sense tingle, we also support passing all credentials via API methods. So if you want to use environment variables, like if you're on Amazon Lambda or some other service, you can put all the credentials in your environment variables and then just do like .setKey, .setKey2, .setKey3. We don't call them key 1 and key 2, but it's essentially like that. But when you're testing, this is a bit simpler. In this case, I'm doing an OCR operation, so I make an OCR object. I tell it the input, and then when it's done, I tell it where to save it. Pretty much every other line of code is going to look exactly like this. I will show you the example. And I'll make it bigger again. Let me scroll up. The only thing I did here, and if you were in my session earlier today about using async await and adding promises to code to make it a bit nicer, I took our default code and I made it a bit nicer by wrapping it in a promise. That way over here, I could basically say, hey, my input is a PDF that needs to be OCR'd. I want to save it to this file name. And I basically just want to do await OCR PDF. I will show you, I'll run this. CD services. It's not terribly exciting because it just kind of plain works. Reads in my credential data. It takes the PDF. It's sitting into Adobe now. We're doing OCR on it. This should take between 5 to 10 seconds. How long it will take will be based on your network connection, how big your PDF is, how complex your PDF is. This one was 16 seconds. And just to show you, this is the PDF that needed to be OCR'd. It's a very exciting vendor security review program. But you can't search in this, you can't select text because it's essentially a bunch of images. Have you all seen PDFs like this? I've seen a bunch of them. The one that's now been OCR'd now has text that could be searched, that could be indexed, that could be searched against. So I will fully admit that is not exciting at all, but that's really darn useful because now you can look at things like people are uploading PDFs that you need to manage. You could do things like running an OCR on it. You could run a compression on it to make it a little bit smaller. You can make those documents better and more just more better. It's been a long day. I'm running out of adjectives. Better and more better. But the PDF Services API is all those kind of mechanical things to work with your documents. Any questions on that? If you want, you can also use this in other services. So let me see if this opens. Anybody here heard of Pipedream? Anybody heard of Microsoft Power Automate? There's a couple of services out there that allow people to build workflows. Essentially, imagine like Lego bricks of do action 1, then do action 2, then do action 3. Pipedream is one of these services where when you sign up, they have a lot of pre-built Lego pieces. Like, for example, adding a file to Dropbox. They have code that you can just say, hey, when I drop something in a folder, just do something. And I was able to use their code and write a bit of node code to say, when someone drops a file in a Dropbox folder, I'm going to get that PDF, I'm going to add a password to it, and I'm going to copy it to a new location. So all of our stuff works well in cases like this. I also have a blog post on our Medium site talking about Lambda. It pretty much just works. The only thing you have to worry about is the intricacies of how Lambda works, or in this case, the way Pipedream works. So more about that. Do remember, it used to be called PDF Tools. I mentioned how the credential information can be passed in. You can also chain stuff. So if you want to do a OCR and then a password protect and then a compress, it's mostly easy to kind of chain those things together. And now I'm going to talk about document generation. And if I say docgen, please throw something at me because apparently legally there's a trademark issue with that. So we never call it docgen, it's always document generation. This is a pretty interesting feature because it takes a Microsoft Word document as a template. And then our API will take that Word document, it'll take whatever data you have, and it'll spit out a PDF or a Microsoft Word document if you want. So a semi kind of concrete example of this, I go in Microsoft Word and I design a template. I then put some basic tokens in there, and I'll show how that works in a moment. I take that and I pass it to our API, and then I take my data. That could be database data. It could be data from a file on my file system. It could be some other API. It could be your API. I take data from your API. I take my Microsoft Word template. I pass it to the service, and then what I get out is a dynamic PDF. So the way this works, it actually uses a template language based on JSON Nada. You can find out more about that at jsonnada.org. It supports basic variables along with doing looping, conditionals, and formatting. So to be clear, what we did is we made Microsoft Word dynamic. That sounds crazy, but it's really kind of fun, I think. And when we say your data, again, this could be any data at all. And I'm going to show you an example right in Microsoft Word. And if you had told me 5 years ago I'd be doing a demo in Microsoft Word, I would have thought you were crazy. So I will make some big text here. You light up my life. You are age years old. Is that big enough, or should I make it a little bit bigger? I'm just going to make it bigger because it's small for me. So one of the things we ship is a document generation Microsoft Word add-in. So think about your non-technical users who are comfortable working in Microsoft Word. They want to make some dynamic template. They can go in here and they can get started. Now, perhaps their developer friend gave them a JSON file, but if not, I could say continue without JSON data. And I know that I'm going to have a name that's just a basic string value. And I'm going to have an age. That will be a number. And once this is done, all it does is create tags where I can go in here and then say select this and say make it a variable. And by the way, I could type all this if I know it's bracket, but again, you can imagine you're a non-technical user. So I work on this, I make it pretty, I add the official Adobe corporate red. I should know the RGB, I don't. I could add pictures and stuff like that, but I want to test this out. I'll click generate document. It'll give me some sample data. And I'll just say I'm Ray and I'm 48. Hit continue. And obviously you can get a little bit more complex. It's doing its magic. And when it's done, I could click View Document and see the PDF. Now, that was all hard-coded, but if you can imagine, I have a database table full of people. I know their name and their ages, and I need to generate PDFs for all of them. I literally write the code. The code's like almost the exact same as the OCR's crap, right? Execution context, my credentials. It's a different service endpoint, but I point to Microsoft Word and I point to my data. I will spend more time actually in Microsoft Word making it look nice there than I do in code. I mentioned that we support things like conditionals. I could also do that visually by going in here and saying conditional content. Let's say if age is greater than 45, insert condition, and it drops it in there. I'm just going to take this out here, put it there, and say, you are old. By the way, I'm talking about me. If you're over 45, I just mean me, nobody out there. I feel old. But basically, what I've done is I've actually added programming logic in Microsoft Word. So now if I do generate document, and I'll keep the age at 0, hit continue, hit view, come on, view document, and I will see the conditional part didn't show up. So you can get more complex. You can do tables of data. And what's nice, again, imagining this kind of non-technical but Microsoft Word familiar user. If you as the developer, if you give them some sample data as a file, say, hey buddy, just upload this into Microsoft Word, they can use that add-in to kind of set up, design, make a pretty table, do alternating table rows and all that fancy stuff that I don't do very well. And then all those tokens get replaced with live data when you use the service. As a real example of this, let me close this up. So I have a demo called Generate Cat Report that's going to read data from a database, a database of cat owners, information about their cats. In this case, it is hard-coded into a JSON file. Let me scroll up here. So I have Raymond Camden, I have my address, phone number, and all that, and I have an image. Document generation supports dynamic images. You do have the base 64 encoded first. So if you have binary data in your APIs, your database, whatever, there are a million libraries out there to convert that to base 64. I created a template. Let me get here real quick. And again, I apologize. My laptop battery died and all my open windows went bye-bye. DocGen. Cat template done. So I used all of my Microsoft Word skills to create this cat report. And then the end result, after I run this, I won't run it live, but I'll just show you. There's one for me and one for my wife and different image. So you can imagine, again, you have this table, thousands, hundreds of users, whatever. Generate the Word document. Again, the code that I wrote, that was 5 minutes, not because I'm smart, just because it's Word document, data, send, that's it. All of the work, most of the work was done in kind of laying out the Word template. Believe it or not, I struggled big time on the address to make it so that when it wrapped the line, it maintained the tab index for that. I struggled and then got it working and then promptly forgot how to do it. So hopefully that'll never come up again. But again, spent more time designing in Word than actually working in the API, which I think is pretty cool. In terms of images, we support PNG, JPEG, GIF, mostly sure, and we just added support for SVG. So what's cool about that is that you can generate a chart in SVG. So you can actually have dynamic charts. So if you, like for your cats, if you've been seeing this cat for many years and have tracked their weight because you're worried about the cat's weight, you can actually give the person a chart of their cat's weight and they can see how much weight they have gained, because I'm convinced cats don't lose weight, they only gain weight. At least my cats only gain weights. But you could have that level of dynamic image within your PDF document. Some more information about that. So obviously, I'm the person at Adobe who does everything of cats. If you need something a bit more serious, we have, oh, they actually say DocGen up there. I'm gonna tell branding. We have a lot more serious templates, so invoices, proposal letters, but it's not wedding proposal, by the way. Don't get too excited, it's just proposal. Offer letters, receipts, all kind of very boring but pretty documents. And we actually have an online sandbox. So you can actually run these templates online with some real data. And that's that link right there. I won't go to it. Any questions on document generation before I move on?
I'm just curious with something. I used to work with Lightcycle as services, so it's kind of similar in the features that it's have.
You said you worked on client side what?
No, I mean, I used to work with Lightcycle as a service.
Oh.
Yeah, so a long time ago, I know. So and most of these features match with several things there.
So he's asking, is this related to the older Lifecycle product? I have no clue. I am assuming Adobe reuses technology. Like I know we're doing stuff that the Acrobat desktop client does as well. I know we have server-side stuff based on that. I let engineering do what they do, and I just complain when they do it wrong. That's like my job. The final part I'm talking about is the PDF Extract API. This will extract information from your PDF using powerful AI, ML, and other buzzwords, powered by Adobe Sensei, if you've ever heard of that before. This returns a lot of data about your PDF. So to be clear, it's not just like the text, but all of the images, all of the tables. And it can actually parse the table and give you a CSV or XLS file based on that tabular data, or even a picture of it as well. It does return the text, but along with the text, the exact position, the exact font, any font metrics like it's italicized. It returns every single bit of data you could possibly imagine. So I'm going to show you an example of this, but mainly I'm going to show you the output because the code should look, let me close this up a little bit, very similar to everything else. So I make a credentials object, I make a execution context based on what I'm doing, I pass in my input, and then I save the output. I will fully admit this code does not roll off the top of my tongue or tip of my tongue. That's why typically I take it, I drop it into a function, and I don't think about it ever again. The output is a zip. At minimum, it's a JSON file that's extremely large. It's all the text, all the fonts, etc. You have to tell it if you want images and tables. That's more work, so we won't do that extra work if you don't need it. As an example of what that JSON looks like, it is right here, and it is 16, yes, I know it's too large, thank you, 17,000 lines. And it is really like everything you could possibly imagine. Even, for example, that something's in a table cell. So if you need that level of granularity, we have that. We also output the tables in either CSVs or graphics. And also, if you had images in there, we give you access to those as well. So this is a great example of where this could be useful. So on our blog, I have a fictional example of a space organization, a space government organization that they've taken all their old journals and they've turned them into PDFs. And that's great, right? So it's no longer paper, it can't be destroyed, it'll live forever. However, in all these journals, they have all these tables of data that while you have nice electronic access to, you don't really have programmatic access to. So in my hypothetical situation, I had like 20 years of monthly reports about the luminance of like 20 stars or so. And again, those are all PDFs. I have easy access to them. All that data was kind of locked behind the PDF. Because the Extract API can get that data in a CSV format, I wrote code that went to every single PDF, all 20 times 12, got all the tabular data out it, got it in CSV, sucked it all into one big, large object, and then I had essentially, for these stars, I had 20 years of monthly reports on a star and how its luminance changed over that 20 years. So it's a great example of, even though PDF is a great format, it's very portable, you may still have data and information in there that you don't have access to. Extract API can give you better access to that. So I know I said a lot. I want to give you some resources. We obviously have docs. I will say that our docs are moving somewhat soon. I'm probably not supposed to say that, but I'll say it anyway. If you wait till after the new year to download my slide deck and look at my crap, know that some of these links may be broken at that time. We're supposed to have redirects, but I kind of assume that things won't work. We have a great support forum. We get a lot of traffic there, and we try to respond pretty quickly. We're also on Stack Overflow, kind of just starting there. I recommend Stack Overflow, but you could use the forums or the Stack Overflow, whatever you want. We have a blog on Medium, and I know I published something today. I forgot. Oh yeah, I did an example of using a natural language API. So I use Extract to get textual data out, and then from that I pass it to a natural language API. And what this allowed me to do, and you should read the article, it's really exciting. But at the end of it, I'll scroll down. This is me just blathering along. I like to hear myself talk, as you can tell. But at the very end, where's that picture? Oh, forgot to put the picture in. I'll fix that right away. But at the end, I was actually able to show, here's a PDF. This PDF talks about Ray and Jay. This PDF topic is about computer science and cats. And that was all by taking the extract API, get the text, pass the text to a natural language processor that understood what the text was about, and then able to present that in a web application, not only like here's foo.pdf, but foo.pdf talks about A, B, and C and topics X, Y, and Z. And I'm totally embarrassed. I'm gonna blame Medium. I know I copied and pasted HTML and it all worked, except that darn image at the very end. And we have a pretty much monthly live stream that's on YouTube and LinkedIn as well. I didn't know LinkedIn had live streams until a couple months ago. But if you want to see me talk more about cats, me and my coworkers and other Adobe Pdf API stuff, we are on there. So, any questions on that? On anything? On cats?
You had mentioned your point that the zip file can have password protection. As far as the level of password protection or the algorithm, can you set that as well so it's really secure?
So his question was, I mentioned that you could password protect a PDF document. What level of encryption is that? I do not know. I know that it shows up in PDF properties. I don't remember if our API lets you specify how strong it is, because if you're not exporting, you could possibly do lower, I guess. So I would say check our docs, because that's what I will do, and see it there. I did the simplest option of just, set password. That's a great question. Thank you. I'm going to check on that. Yes?
There is some specific documentation for understand all the fields in the JSON file.
So his question was, is there documentation on all that stuff from the JSON file? But that's a lot of crap. There is some documentation, but even better, we have a JSON schema file, which if you have an editor that supports JSON schema, like Visual Studio Code, and I'm pretty sure I did mine, right? It's been a little while. So if this was working, your editor on mouse over will tell you what those keys mean. So yes, we support it. I had it working in Visual Studio Code. I probably broke it myself. But yes, we have that. Another good question. Thank you. Who here is wondering if I'm going to fall? No one's worried about me falling? I am terrified of falling. I've not been doing this for like a year and a half, so I'm used to the Zoom session where I could slouch and not worry about moving at all. By the way, thank you all for showing up. I really, really appreciate it. Have a great rest of the conference.